Hello, everyone out there. Thanks for joining us today. We are here with Gary Vanbutsele from Whale. How's it going, Gary?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on, Ian.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure having you on. Thanks for joining us. And we're looking forward to the talk today. So, Gary, where are you coming to us from today?
I'm calling in from Ghent and specifically in Belgium. So we're already
Nice.
closing
Awesome.
down today here at 6 p.m. It's a bit sooner where most
Cool.
of the people are calling in from, I assume.
Yeah. I'm over here in California, so I'm just getting going for my day. And Ivy chimed in. Happy Monday. Thanks for hosting this today, Ian and Gary. You're welcome, Ivy. So, yeah, if anybody else wants to throw in the chat where they're coming to us from, we always like to kind of get an idea of where our listeners are coming from and chiming in. But awesome. Yeah, like I said, Gary, thanks for joining us. So, we have a really great talk today from Gary. And let me just give you a brief introduction and we'll let you take it away. So if anybody has any questions while Gary's giving his talk, I'll be monitoring the chat and we'll save some time at the end for Q&A. So I'll be sure to mark all the questions I see in the chat and be sure to get those to Gary afterwards. And then I believe Gary does have an offer for us at the end that we'll be waiting to see. And yeah, so Gary is the co-founder and CEO of Whale. He's also the host of the Chaos to Clarity podcast. And as the former founder of an IT services company, where every day felt like putting out fires, he's now obsessed with helping entrepreneurs unlock the next level of growth. So today we'll be talking a little bit about frameworks to unlock the next level of growth for your business, 3 steps to creating effective playbooks, processes, and standards of procedures, strategies for saving time with your documentation, the KISS mindset and how to use it, and a bunch of other good stuff. So I don't want to take up too much time here because Gary's got a lot of information for us. So Gary, without further ado, feel free to take it away. And I think you're going to share your screen and
Yeah.
present some slides to us. And awesome.
All right, here we go. Let me turn on my
Cool.
screen.
Yeah, if anybody in the chat can let us know, you can see the screen, you can hear us just fine. Just give us a thumbs up or a yes, which would be great.
Yeah. Is my
But I
screen
think we should be good to
yeah,
go.
is my screen fully shared because I've got it in a kind of thumbnail view here,
Yep,
or are we good?
gotcha. It looks good to me.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's full screen. We're on my end. So yeah, cool,
perfect. Well,
awesome.
again,
I think we're good.
appreciate the opportunity to share. So, as you already mentioned, Ian, um, I've run a couple of businesses before. Currently acting as the CEO and co-founder of Whale. Also, podcast host, Chaos to Clarity, as you mentioned, where we share in like very short episodes. We host subject matter experts. We've had Keith on from SegMetrics as well, where we
Mhm.
basically put the spotlight in a 10-minute frame on a specific topic and how to improve it in your business. I've always been a growth fanatic, but I've been really getting my hands dirty the last 3 years since I've started Whale.
Mhm.
And it's also the topic of this specific webinar. We truly believe that with the framework
Cool.
we've built, it will allow you to unlock a next level of growth, one you might not have looked into in the past, but where I hope to share some insight on today. Finally, I'm a father of 2 small little gremlins that keep me up late at night and during the night, and give me a lot of stress, but also a lot of joy. So that's me
Cool.
in a nutshell. What I want to talk today about is I don't know if anyone remembers that name. It's called Chinese Whispers or Pass the Message, and the game is most of people played this when they were young, where you got in a row and you were like 5 or 6 or 7 kids next to each other, and what you did is one person came up with a message, right, and they whispered that
Mhm.
message in the next person's ear, and then it went from one person to the other. And ultimately, what almost always happened is that the last kid had to speak out the message out loud at the end, and it almost never was the same as in the beginning, right? Like things got transformed during the
Mhm.
process, and what the message ultimately was not at all what the first person came up with. And so we tend to refer to that as the leaky bucket syndrome because the same thing applies in a business as you try to transfer knowledge from one person to another. You start off with a lot of knowledge that you build up in your business. You figure things out, how to do specific things. You've found a process that works where you make clients happy. And then you start hiring people and you start to transfer how to do these things to the next person. But as you start out, your bucket is full of water. All of the knowledge is in your head and you're passing it along, but some of that information gets lost because either the person has a hard time comprehending, maybe the message is not super clear. Anyway, some of the water spills, and so the next person is left with just a little less water than you started off from. And the bigger you get, the more you start to pass this bucket along, the more water spills, and the bigger the issue starts to become, because at the end maybe your bucket is empty and people just don't know how to do things effectively and efficiently anymore. And so that's what we call the leaky bucket syndrome. If you don't have a good way to pass on information, pass on knowledge, and train people, you're going to end up with empty buckets, and you're going to end up with people being frustrated on all facets. So this is really what we want to talk to you about today. That's really what the entire framework is about, because I think most people would agree that to really scale a business, you're going to need documented playbooks, you're going to need standard operating procedures and processes, and ultimately you will need to train people. The biggest issue, though, is that, and this is what we hear all the time, is I see the value, Gary, but I just don't know where to start. I seem to never find the time, or I just struggle to involve others in participating in the specific area of the business and getting some of that work done. And basically, the framework is going to be an answer to these three objections. It's going to offer you a very simple framework because it only involves three things, but it's going to allow you to find that growth through a flywheel framework. And so for those unfamiliar with a flywheel framework, a flywheel means that as soon as you start and end, it keeps going and it keeps accelerating. And the more you follow these three steps, the more growth, as you can see in the center, is going to be unlocked. And so what I want to do today is basically talk a little bit about these three elements to the framework. It's about documenting, it's about training, and it's about measuring impact. And I'm going to share some methodologies and some tips and tricks on how to get some of this stuff done without spending 6 months. Because again, everyone's busy, there's always other priorities. But I want to share how this framework for a lot of our clients have given them the ability to actually complete this framework and this flywheel at least once in under 14 days. So that's kind of my goal today. And as you already mentioned, Ian, there's a special bonus at the end of this presentation, which is going to help you accelerate this entire journey even further. So
Awesome.
before we dive into the specifics, I wanted to share some of the reasons why you should care about this. And so there's a couple of maturity levels in a business, as we call them, when it relates to building playbooks and training people and measuring for impact. And it allows you to mature as a business, but it allows you to grow as well, starting from a small startup to becoming a bigger scale up. And when you're still kind of a smallish business, let's say maybe 10 people or less in your organization, documentation is going to allow you to delegate things. If you're a business owner and you're still doing a lot of stuff yourself, having a playbook to pass along to someone else will allow you to pass off some of your responsibilities in a more effective way. It's going to avoid knowledge loss down the road. If you're training someone and that person leaves with a wealth of knowledge and they haven't written anything down to pass along to their successor, a lot of that information gets lost. And in a lot of cases, we see a lot of business owners ultimately working in the business like the entire day. And as a business owner, it's not necessarily your task to work in the business, but on the business. And so being able to take a step back and focus on more strategic work is one of the outcomes of focusing on this kind of work. The training aspects, I think, are more straightforward. I mean, if you've got a streamlined way to train new people, it's going to reduce the new hire ramp-up time. So you'll be able to put them to action much quicker than you would in a traditional method. It's going to become a differentiator in the war for talent, where you'll be able to attract and retain better talent if you offer them the support they need to be more successful. And to your customers, it's going to allow you to offer a more consistent way to cater to their needs. And so if it's Susie or Phil or Mark working on an account, the experience is going to be the same, and it's going to be the best experience you know how to offer. And then finally, when you're ready to scale up and expand your business in new ways, having playbooks will allow you to potentially franchise your business, and ultimately it also increases your business valuation. And I've been so fortunate to sell some of my businesses, and having documentation allows you to up the value, basically because you remove yourself as a founder from the equation, and you go from being a founder-led business to a process-led business, and that's much more valuable to someone buying your business. So if you weren't convinced before, hopefully you are with this slide. I want to dive into the first part of the flywheel, which is document. And it's probably the least sexy part, right? I don't think anyone is jumping out of bed to start documenting and building playbooks for their team. But it is a necessary evil, and it does not need to be as painful as a lot of businesses think. If you follow these 3 steps, you're going to be building effective playbooks or processes or SOPs, whatever you want to call them, and whatever you want to build out for your team. But by following these 3 steps, you're going to create them at a speed and at a volume where it's not going to overload your schedule in any way. And it starts with identifying what you should be building, to then actually building them and documenting them, and then finally organizing them. And I'm going to share a couple of methods for all of these 3 steps on mostly how to reduce the time and effort to getting there. Before I dive into those, I do want to share some basic principles that always apply. First of all, not all documentation is created equal. When we think about documentation, we often think about lengthy manuals and PDFs and 20-pagers that basically nobody really gets excited about. And so documentation does not need to be just that boring, lengthy document. It can be video, can be text, can be screen recordings, can be basically whatever is necessary to get a message across. And with all the media types today, there's a lot of variety to be utilized in that. One of the biggest things I can hopefully sell you on is that any percentage that's higher than 0 is better than 0. Even if you only document 10 or 20% of the things that your team needs, it's still better than 0. So what I'm trying to get across here is that trying to avoid starting with this and putting it off until you think you'll have enough time to really do a lot of this work has no sense. I mean, if you start today, you're going to be further ahead than you were yesterday. Just getting started is the first step in your journey. One of the things I would always recommend is to also focus just on the common and repeatable. You do not need to have a playbook for everything, only for the things that happen often and that have a big impact on your business, not the use cases that happen once every month or every 3 months. Those are exceptions and probably do not need any documentation right now. Kind of same applies as to the 50% is better than 0. I mean, high level is better than nothing at all. So you do not need to go into all the details and the nitty-gritty of how you want things done immediately. Just kind of high-level guidelines and best practices will get you very far already. And then finally, a tip that a lot of businesses kind of tend to forget, but is to use common terminology. Do not go into fancy terms when you write or document or create videos on how you refer to specific things. Use the words you always use in your business. So make sure there's a common terminology and framework around how you call things, because it's going to help with comprehension and also findability in the end. So I want to share a couple of methods to help you identify where you should start, assuming you don't have a lot of documentation built out yet, or you feel like, hey, there's still a lot of gaps that probably needs to be filled out. I'm going to give you about, I think, 5 or 6 methods on considering where to start. And the first one is a new hire ramp-up method. If you're going to hire someone new in the next couple of weeks or months, think about what kind of playbook, what kind of information is going to help that person ramp up more quickly. What are the topics that's going to allow me to transfer knowledge to this person so they can become more autonomous quickly into the position that they were hired to do so. So just focus on those areas. Again, does not have to have all the details, but some kind of guidance in these first 2 to 3 weeks instead of trying to offload all of that information in a boardroom could be the first thing you focus on. Another method could be the delegation metrics. So remember that one of the benefits for mostly smaller businesses is to be able to take off some of the hats that you're wearing in the business. So maybe you're still doing sales and customer success and maybe finance. So as you want to start handing off some of these responsibilities, think about what are the things that someone else could be doing and how do I make it easy on them to take those responsibilities. And so just select the things that probably are not giving you a lot of energy and you feel are kind of cumbersome for the more strategic work you'd like to be doing, and select those to create playbooks and offer those as guidance for that person. The third one could be a team survey. Like, just ask your team what would move the needle for you. What would make a big difference if you had the playbooks for that ready tomorrow? And so they are going to come up with the things they're probably struggling the most with, or where they have least knowledge about, or where they see the biggest opportunity. So it could be as simple as just asking them that question and identifying priorities from their replies. Method 4 is called low-hanging fruit. So most companies today, they have chat tools like Slack or Teams. They still probably have a lot of emails coming in from team members as well. So go and look at the data and the questions that show up in your emails and your chat tools, because probably a lot of repetitive questions come up there. The same things tend to be asked over and over and over again. You keep losing time having to give the same reply and helping out with the same topic. If you go and look at that information and identify which questions keep popping up, that could be an indication of where you might want to start as well. And then there's method 5, which is called EOS core process. So EOS is a common business framework that a lot of companies use, but the thought here is mostly to start from a very high level segment. So looking at what are the key processes in my business, and often there's 5 to 7 things like sales, the finance process, an operational process, an HR process, things that almost every business have, and start from a high level perspective. Just explain how the different bigger processes match with each other, mostly for clarity purposes, so people understand the bigger picture and start to comprehend how their role ties into the bigger strategy. So those are some of the methods that you can utilize to identify where to start, because you do not need to start and consider, I need to do everything. You can start with just a small portion and use these methods to identify what that portion might look like. Once you've done that, obviously it's time to start documenting. And there again, there are some methods to save you a lot of time. A very common one, but still overlooked as well, is just having a template to get started from. Do not have your people start from scratch over and over and over again. If you know you're going to create multiple playbooks or going to address multiple subjects, just create a predefined template of what that document needs to look like. Maybe you want to have an introductory of what the purpose is of this playbook. Maybe you want your specific steps to be outlined in a specific way. Maybe you want to interlink to additional resources. Just make sure they can start from the template, duplicate it very easily, and then just fill in the blanks, basically. Excuse me. So having that ready is going to save them time and is going to allow you to have consistency, so everything looks the same way as multiple people might contribute to documenting. The screen recorder is one of my favorites because ultimately, if you create playbooks, it means that you've already identified something that goes well, right? Like, you know that selling in a certain way is going to lead to a lot of wins down the line. And so if you're already doing things that you want to transfer that knowledge to others, basically all you need to do is keep executing the way you do, but just turn on your screen recorder. Just do what you regularly do during the week, but record it this time. And so all you need to do is show and tell what you're going through, and this serves as that first draft, that first 50 or 60%. And it's already going to be much more than what you had previously, because it's going to be a video of you explaining how this specific process or topic needs to be executed. So it should not even take more time because you're already doing this. All you need to do is click record and then save and share with the team, and you'll be further ahead than you were before. This can be very effective if you combine it with method 3, which is called the junior transfer. So imagine you're hiring someone new, a more junior staff member, and they start onboarding with you. What you could do is not only give them that screen recording and ask them to, for example, transcribe that in a more written out playbook, because that will help them in 2 areas. First of all, it's going to help them first by looking at the video, comprehend what they need to be learned about, they need to be trained about. But in addition, by writing it out, it's going to help them retain that information much better than by just watching it once. In addition, if you haven't screen recorded anything and you're still doing the traditional on-the-job training where this person is sitting next to you, ask for them to take notes while you explain things, because those notes could be the foundation for your playbook. And so again, same benefits apply. They write down this information, which allows them to retain it much better, and you'll have that first draft ready to then transfer to additional people. So you've gone through 2 steps already when it comes to the document parts. You've identified where to start, you've actually documented it, and you've used some of these methods to save time. Finally, you need to organize it for scalability. And what we mean by that is that documentation for documentation's sake is not helping anyone. It needs to be easily accessible, easily findable, and easy to manage, because over time, probably a lot of your playbooks will need to be updated and maintained. And so if you need to half an hour to find the information, you already have a bigger problem there. So once you start organizing and centralizing that information, there's a couple of things to consider. The KISS method is keep it simple and stupid. Don't go into a hierarchy with 17 subfolders where nobody's going to find what they need. Just keep it quite flat in the beginning, definitely if you don't have a lot of information. Excuse me, I'm going to drink a little bit of water because my throat's ailing. But keeping it simple in the beginning is going to help you a lot. Define access levels. Not everyone needs to have access to everything. So again, in the mindset of keeping it simple, just defining what information and what people need access to what information is going to simplify them finding what they need. Use a hierarchy if you need to go into multiple levels of organization already because you have, some volume of playbooks, then make sure it reflects your business structure, a structure that people are already familiar with and understand, like, hey, I'm in the sales department, and in the sales department, we've got things like sales strategies. Try to mimic that hierarchy with a structure that people are already accustomed to. And then finally, make sure to assign ownership and a review regularly. We see this every time over and over again, is that people take the effort to create these playbooks, and then 6 months later or a year later, nobody has revised them, even though things have changed in the business, and people just don't trust the playbook anymore because they know it's out of date. So by assigning ownership and making sure that the right person knows to review it regularly, and there's this kind of time-based schedule to it, people know that they can trust whatever they've built out in the past. So you've gone through the 3 steps. You've built one or more playbooks, and ultimately a playbook only becomes valuable if you share that with a team member or multiple team members. And that's what we mean by train. And train has multiple facets to it. There's onboarding, We identify onboarding, training, and reinforcements. And so basically, these are the three essential trainings that you need to have in place for your employees to be successful at the position you hired them into. And onboarding starts with more general topics like your company story, what your mission, what your history, what your values and policies are. We tend to refer this as your warm welcome. It's going to allow them to kind of get the orientation that they need in your business. It needs to reconfirm that they've made a good decision joining your business. And just building that out can be as simple as having your CEO do like a welcome video and have that available the first day that they start to kind of get them accustomed with what is some of the history behind the business. Once you've passed onboarding and general orientation, obviously it needs to turn into skill training and position training. And there it's really about the processes and SOPs and the tools that you have, and just making sure it connects to them in a relevant way. I tend to see companies try and transfer as much information as they can in a very short period of time, and people brains get fried because it's just too much information to kind of try to digest at once. And so try and think about a spaced way in which you can offer that kind of training, which I'll give a couple of tips and tricks in a second. And then finally, reinforcement. Make sure that specific information is being repeated multiple times, because we tend to forget a lot of information the first time we hear it. So you need an efficient way to retrain and reinforce specific information so it sticks into the long-term retention. When we talk about orientation and general onboarding, there's a lot of topics you could include. We've made a high-level mapping. I'm not going to go through all of them here, but I'm sure the slide deck gets shared afterwards, so you'll be able to look at all this information. But really think about, how do I reinforce the fact that people feel that they've made a good decision joining your business? How do you make sure that they feel welcomed, and that every answer they might still have around policies and your business is being answered into your, what we tend to call, employee handbook. And so that ranges from general company information, like who's who, where did we start and where are we now, to even maybe a recommended reading list that you've compiled over the years. The benefits and perks, to what are some of the guidelines when it comes to working hours and paying time off, etc. So make sure these answers to these common questions get answered when people join your business. When you focus on position and process training, the next step in the development of your employee, there are a couple of metrics or a couple of research findings to consider. And these are the top three things that I like to highlight. One being that people tend to learn or prefer to learn at their own pace. So that connects back to what I said earlier. Trying to overload people with too much information at once is obviously not the preferred way for people. Everyone learns at a different pace, and giving the opportunity to your employees to kind of take it at their own speed is going to benefit them greatly, and yourself as well. Learning at the point of need as well, again, connects to the same thing. If you're being trained on specific situations that might only occur in like the next 2 or 3 months, it might not feel very relevant to have all that information right now. So maybe that specific training needs to be closer to when you're going to start doing that specific type of work. And then finally, the majority of people prefer to learn while working, because again, it feels more relevant, it feels more time sensitive, and it's going to be easier to connect to the actual work that they're doing if it's a task that they're executing on at the moment. So considering these three elements, there's a couple of tips I want to share here. Is that when it comes to training and offering learning experience, consider combining a couple of things. Obviously, Whale is a solution that allows you to offer online training, which we'll get to in a second, but it's not a silver bullet. the real impact is going to be made when you combine some of these experience where the repeatable maybe gets offered through online training, and then maybe the nuance gets offered through classroom training, and then you evolve onto on-the-job training where you go case by case and you distill specific situations. So combining these are going to offer a much more valuable experience than just focusing on just one. I said this before, but space out the learning journey so you're not overwhelming people in the first couple of weeks. Onboarding and training could go up as far as 6 months, again, depending on the role and positioning, but offer it in a way where they feel like they have enough room to really go and compress everything into their minds and use it when it becomes relevant. And it connects to the next point, make learning lifelong. Do not think about training as something you need to handle in the first couple of weeks and months of someone's career in your business, but consider it as something you should be doing on an ongoing basis. So continuous learning makes sense because your business keeps evolving. You keep getting better, bigger, more effective. So you need to make sure people get aligned with that new and better way of doing things. So put it in a frame where it's not just a one-off thing, but something that is being continuously focused on. Make learning easy to consume. If you're going to make it hard on people to learn new things in your business, they're not going to be very incentivized to keep upskilling themselves. So think Netflix for training. Make it as easy as possible. Make it the experience to learn new things as easy as selecting the next movie or series that you're going to binge watch. And then finally, consider just-in-time training. And just-in-time training is when you're facing specific situations and they get the ability to upskill themselves on that specific situation at that specific moment. So not 6 months prior or after the fact, but when that specific situation occurs, make sure again that they are that it's super easy to find that relevant piece of information for them to handle and execute on. And finally, we talk about reinforcements. And reinforcements, it's about battling the forgetting curve. And the forgetting curve is research that has been done that shows that when you learn something new, you forget almost half of it after 3 or 4 days. So all that effort you take into transferring knowledge to other people, 50% of that gets lost if you're not reinforcing that information over time. So you need an effective way for specific things to be resent or relearned over time. So think about a way you can do that in a sort of repeatable, consistent process without losing too much time reiterating the same things over and over again. And finally, quizzing, testing people's knowledge helps in long-term retention. It can be as fun as asking questions and have people reply with GIFs, as it can be very simple and just have like an open answer question that people need to reply with text. But giving them the ability to think about what they've just learned about and then formulate it and answer questions is going to, again, help with knowledge retention and also identify where perhaps some gaps still live and where there's some more work that needs to be done. And then that's when you move on to measure. So you've documented things, you've trained people on your documentation, and finally you want to measure the impact. And the impact is, there's 2 things to consider there. It's first of all, identify what you're going to measure, and then how to close the gaps that you've identified. And then it's how to use that to continuously improve and turn this framework into a flywheel for you to go over again. So we've identified 7 gaps that might impact performance and that you want to measure on. So I'll start with the 7 gaps and then I'll give you some hints on how to potentially close those gaps and help out your team members. The first gap is documentation. This topic has not been documented yet. And so That's probably the case for most, and that's obviously where it all starts. So in a second, I'll share with you where you might want to direct your efforts to. The second one is accessibility gaps. Even if you have playbooks and documentation built, chances are that people might still not know where to look because maybe it's fragmented, it's scattered, it's in different formats, and people have just not built the habit of finding that information. So that could be a gap. Searchability. Maybe it's just hard to find what you're looking for. Again, it connects to things like maybe they're using keywords that do not reflect how the documentation was built, or again, they might just not know where to search. And so it's going to obviously inflict pain on the fact that you've documented things, but it's not offering value to your employees. Completion gaps connects more to the training side of things, where maybe you've assigned specific training, but people are just not completing it. They've not gone through all of the steps, all the training, and you seem not to be able to motivate them to do so. Habit gaps, probably the hardest one to change, is that people keep relying on the old way of doing things. So even though you might have made it very accessible and everyone knows where it is, people might still not have gone into a habit of go and check the documentation and rather just ask their neighbor, tap a shoulder, or ask in a chat message how specific things are being done. Review gaps is the sixth one, where you've got playbooks, you've got documentation, but nobody's responsible for keeping it up to date. So they go static, they become irrelevant, and people don't trust them anymore. And finally, you've got comprehension gaps, where perhaps people just don't fully comprehend what they've been trained on. Maybe the playbook was not clear enough, maybe it was too high level, but they've not fully grasped what they should be able to do with that playbook. And so there's a couple of tips to close the gaps. When it comes to documentation, again, add new topics on regular basis by going on feedback and questions, or by using the methods that we've mentioned before with the identify methods. Accessibility, you'll need to educate people on how to find the information, where it lives, and perhaps how it connects to other places. So if you've got a lot of tools like Slack and email, make sure there's an easy way to access the information from those spots, making it easier for them to grab the relevant playbook. Searchability, again, connecting to reviewing the terminology you're using, just making sure it's common, and then if the system allows you to analyze the search patterns. So what are people searching for? How often do they search for it? And what are some of the things that people are searching for, but we know we don't have documented yet? So that will allow you to close that gap as well. Make sure when it comes to training people that you have a process to keep them accountable in team meetings or during employee reviews. So make it something that is being reviewed systematically, and that you can talk about with the person as in a probably one-to-one session. Habit gaps can be reinforced by, again, communicating frequently, reinforcing the message that things need to be done a certain way, but also incentivizing and gamifying can be techniques that you can utilize. So think about perhaps using leaderboards or a reward system for people that have changed their methods more quickly than others. Review gaps we've already covered, but assigning ownership and set review cycles is going to help you make sure everything remains up to date. And then comprehension gaps is as you identify areas for improvements where maybe your playbooks started off high level, but where you feel like there's more detail needed, revise that documentation again on a regular basis and add additional resources. And that's how you end up with a culture of continuous improvement. That ownership piece is very important because that's going to allow you to have accountability and make sure that some of this work gets distributed by reviewing all of your playbooks regularly, you keep going through the flywheel, because as you build one playbook and started training your team on that and start measuring impact, you're going to start identifying new areas and new playbooks to create, and that's how you accelerate that growth pattern. And finally, keep capturing feedback. Keep asking your employees where they feel like they could use additional supports, and that's going to help you move along as well. I'm going to skip this one. Excuse me. So that leads to this being a framework. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice apparently. For doing these three things: documenting, moving to training, and then measuring for impact, and going through the flywheel multiple times over. You can do this in basically any system, but the Whale platform was purposely built to help you accentuate these three things. So we'll help you with saving even more time when you go to documenting, because not only do we have templates for you to get started from, we've got technology built in like a screen recorder. We've got technology where AI will help you document them by just inputting some simple prompts. So if you've looked at all the buzz around ChatGPT, think about ChatGPT for procedures is what we've built within. To a central hierarchy system where you can set permissions, version history built in, to a system that allows you to put ownership and set review cycles. When it comes to the training aspect, we'll allow you to create a custom training journey based on role and positions. We'll give you the opportunity to create quizzes, give it a unified search from a mobile device to a desktop environment, and even a web extension which connects all of your playbooks to your existing tool stack. So imagine you're using Salesforce or HubSpot for your CRM. The web extension will allow your employees to basically surface that playbook from within that system without having to leave their tab. So when it comes to accessibility, you'll accelerate that portion as well. And then Whale offers a lot of measurement and additional insights, from completion rates for your training, to how people search and what the search patterns are, to holding your subject matter experts accountable for keeping all of that material up to date. So while this framework really should allow you to go ahead and just start that journey, will help you do that at a much higher pace. And so a lot of our clients have gone from looking at this as being this huge uphill mountain that they need to climb and spend lots of hours and weeks and months on doing this, and reducing it to an effort of less than 14 days, and actually build out a lot of playbooks for a lot of teams, set up a training journey, and start measuring for impact and continuous improvement. And so being able to do that in just 2 weeks have really accelerated the growth of a lot of our clients. So that's why we came up with this special offer through SegMetrics that's offering you this. Typically, when you subscribe to Whale, there's an optional service offering where everything I shared here today is being put into practice with you on a one-to-one basis. And so not only will we coach you on this framework, but apply it to your specific business situation. If you already have playbooks built, we'll also migrate it into our system. But instead of paying about $2,000, so $2,000 for that, for a limited time only, we're offering that for free. So if you scan the QR codes on this page, that will lead you to learn more about our system. It's going to connect you to one of our product experts, which can guide you through everything that Whale has to offer in about 30 minutes. And then you can decide to take us up on our offer and get the complete guidance for free if you book a demo before the 21st of April. So that kind of wraps up, Ian, my portion for today. So if there are any questions, happy to answer them.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, great presentation. Lots of information, very useful to a lot of our listeners here. And so, yeah, like Gary said, if anybody has any questions, let's throw them in the chat and we can get those answered. But yeah, definitely take up Gary on that offer. That's a killer offer right there. So, and we'll be also sending that out in our replay. But keep in mind, it's only good until the 21st of April. So a couple more weeks until that offer is gone. So just like you said, easiest way, scan that QR code on your phone and get in touch.
Exactly.
Cool. I don't see any questions coming in, so that means it's that was a very thorough presentation. So
we covered a whole lot.
Probably answered all the questions.
Yeah, we covered a lot of things. So so everyone will have access to the slide deck, obviously, because there is a lot of information there. It is built for you to kind of use as a guide to get on that journey of building your playbook, start training teams, and measuring. So do feel free to see it that way. Again, if you feel like this is something that your business could really benefit from in the next couple of weeks and months, connect with one of our product experts. Again, there's no strings attached. It's just learning more about the software and the guidance that we offer, and they'll be happy to answer any remaining question at that time as well.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, Gary, I want to say thanks again for joining us today, and thanks to everyone out there who joined the webinar. And yeah, again, we'll be sending that offer out in the email here in the next day, along with the replay of the entire webinar. So be on the lookout for that. Hit them up on the offer. And again, thanks, Gary, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening over there, right?
Exactly.
So,
thank you.
Over in Belgium.
Thank you so much for having me on, Ian.
Absolutely. Well, until next time, and we'll catch everyone else later. And yeah, we'll see you around.